Hi, everybody. So you've had a chance to look over your scores and comments from your paragraphs that you did on Sunset Boulevard. And overall, across the board, it seemed that the most common comment that I had to make had to do with cinematic evidence and how to incorporate that. Most of what I saw was you telling me what happened. You would make a claim, like you had your topic sentence, and you're getting into it a little bit, and then you would tell me what happened in the film. But most of you failed to tell me how that happens. So, because we're looking at a visual medium, it's not text, it's not written, it's in a visual medium. You also have to tell me the not just the what, but the how it happens. And so you have to use cinematic language in order to do that. You can't just identify. Some of you said, it might have been something in a medium shot, but you didn't tell me like what's the significance of that, or telling me, identifying an over the shoulder shot, but then you have to tell me like the so what, like what, how does that, how does that technique contribute to your understanding of what it is you're claiming? Okay, so anyway, let's look at a couple of student samples. Just stick with me. I'm going to keep this to 20 minutes or less, but I think it'll be helpful for you because I want to show you student samples and how to uh, show what she did well and then what could have been improved upon to strengthen it a little bit. All right, so just a few reminders. When writing about film, pay attention to the way things are arranged. Not just what happens, but how it happens visually. How is it put together? Consider the framing, if it's a tight frame or a loose frame, the angles, the camera movement, lighting, sound, how they reinforce your claims about the characters. For every claim you make, ask yourself, how do I know that? How do I know that this character is being manipulative? Well, how is that scene arranged? What elements of that scene support my reading of the character that way? All right, so here are examples. There's our friend Norma. All right, here's something a student wrote. Norma is left battered by a harsh and unforgiving industry. She is mentally unstable, manipulative, as seen repeatedly in her treatment of Joe, needy, and self absorbed. Okay, so that's a lot for a topic sentence. One suggestion, pick a specific scene that demonstrates the effect Hollywood has had on Norma and demonstrates one or more of the traits listed to describe her. Having four or five, she lists four or five different issues there, and you only have a paragraph. So pick one and identify in a particular scene that supports that. Then look carefully at how the scene is shot for elements of filmmaking that capture her mental instability, her manipulation, her neediness, or her self absorption. Pick one of those. It might include the way Norma is lit, the angle that we see Norma in. Does the camera move? Sometimes, most of the time, it doesn't move with Norma. The camera's stationary. It's kind of interesting. The underscoring when she's on screen, where she appears within the frame in relation to Joe or in relation to Max. Um, I have a still of that. How Gloria Swanson is costumed, how she delivers her lines. We've talked about that just in class, all of us talking together. That this you had mentioned about all the leopard skin and leopard prints that she seems to wear. And there's also her car is lined in leopard print, and what that means. The way that the actress portrays this character, we talked about how her hands just seem to always be in this like tense clawed position, like she's clawing at something like her past or the ideal. I'm not sure, but all of those things together, that warrants some analysis. So here's a couple of stills. So someone in here had mentioned this particular scene right here, that Norma, she's surrounded by pictures of herself. To me, I mean, there's lots of things you can say about this particular shot. Norma, the aged Norma, is in the center of the frame, and you can see, look at her gray hair. She looks older, but she's surrounded from one edge of the frame to the other with photos of herself that are just looking on. And here she is looking out into the distance, surrounded by her younger self. And it's from one side of the frame to the other. So you could talk about the significance of that as she's reading one of her fan letters, right? Okay. Some of you also talked about, I'm going to move down to this corner here. Some of you talked about this shot here, or this scene. You talked about what happened, that Norma and Joe watched movies of her younger self, and that she stood up and pointed at the screen and says, "They're idiots. Have they forgotten what a star looks like?" Okay, that's what happens. But how is this scene arranged? Well, um, she's in a spotlight. She stands up. They're in darkness, and she stands up. She's up above Joe. He's staring up at her. She's in the spotlight, pointing up to herself on the screen. But more importantly, in this shot, if we were to watch it, Norma turns her head very slowly to looking at herself on the screen, to a very slow, deliberate turning of her head, and looks down at Joe Gillis. It's just chilling, really, the way she does it. So those are things to comment on about how this scene is arranged, not just what happens, but how, and how she's depicted as right crazy and maniacal in this scene where the flickering projector is on her. um this one, I love this shot down here. Norma is in the center of the frame, and look at how itty bitty Joe Gillis is in comparison to her. Not just itty bitty in the background, but look at his shoulder pads and how small his head is. Like, so she gets, makes these hand done suits for him and dresses him up in these big shoulder pads and makes him look big, like the big man, but he is so small. He's so small. He's been reduced down almost to this comical figure. And here she is in the center, and Joe's small in the background. All right, so those are just a few passing comments of how to take a shot or a scene, and to talk about how it's arranged and how the arrangement of it contributes to our understanding of Norma and her mental state. Okay, here's another one. By providing us with a sense of Norma's lifestyle as an actress in Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard shows us how Hollywood is yet another version of the American dream. So, what is it about Norma's lifestyle specifically? How do we get a sense of it? How is it portrayed visually through specific theatrical and cinematic choices? Are there particular shots or scenes that accentuate her lifestyle? Where is Norma placed within the frame? What type of shots are used to capture her? Her costuming. Mise en scène, remember, mise en scène is the costumes and the makeup and the props. What version of the American dream is it? I mean, is the film presenting it in a negative or a positive light? Well, I think we would probably say it's negative, but how? In what way? So again, these stills are ones that I took from your paragraphs of scenes that you referenced. You told me the what, like what happens, but not the how. How is it arranged? So again, I'll talk about this one here where my cursor is. Again, Norma is in the forefront of this shot. Look at, she's draped in her leopard skin. Look at what's next to her. She's sitting by the pool in the sun like a cat laying in the sun, just lounging. She's got sterling silver ice bucket. She has champagne on ice. She's drinking champagne. And then there's Max, itty bitty, just like Joe Gillis in that last shot, right? He's so small and just waiting behind her. Here she's got her cigarette on the little stand that she keeps in her clawed hand. A lot of things to talk about with this shot. But if we're talking about Norma's, about the American dream and about Hollywood, let's talk about the opening shot. Some of you talked about Norma's house and her lifestyle. Before we even meet Norma, we meet the house. The house is what we see before we see Norma. But that house is foreshadowing what we're going to see with Norma. Joe Gillis talks in a voiceover about the house and how it used to be one of these gorgeous, luxurious mansions back in its heyday. But when you look closer, that it's in decay. It's old, it's in decay, it's broken down, the trees, things are dying, it's unkempt. That's what he notices and commentates about the house. And then we meet Norma. Okay. I'm going to skip this one just because I want to keep the time. We can come back to it. Let's talk about this one. I really like this one because this student typed something here, and then I bolded where she's trying some cinematic evidence. She's making an attempt, and I want to talk about it a little bit. So this also relates to the house. Norma's house is the first thing of hers that's shown in the film, even before herself. You see how grand and luxurious it is, yet how old and how it's also old, dated, and neglected. When Joe Gillis arrives, he says, it was a great big white elephant of a place, the kind crazy movie people bought in the crazy 20s. A neglected house gets an unheavy look. There's a shot where the camera zooms in on some mice in her yard, once again showing the true state of her home. As the film progresses, it becomes clear that Norma's house is the perfect reflection of her. Now, I dig what the student is saying here, and the analysis and the commentary is spot on. But I bolded this here because I want her to go further. I want her to say more. There's a shot where the camera zooms in on some mice in her yard. Fine. But what is the effect? What's the purpose of that zoom? So if we're up and we're looking at it from Joe's point of view, why not just have the mic? What is the effect of having the camera zoom in on these rats? Well, we could say that from a distance, we might not even notice that there's rats and mice running through. But the fact that the camera, the authorial point of view, Billy Wilder wants us to see those rats. He wants us to be repulsed by it. He wants us to see that, wow, this is a beautiful mansion. But when we zoom in and we look a little closer, it is in decay and that there are rats running freely. How would the scene be different if they were only seen from a distance, seen in close up from the beginning? I want you to connect the device, connect the evidence with your claim through careful commentary. Don't just identify the technique, but connect it. Okay? All right. So this is one I was talking about with the framing. Even though Joe is presented in a tight frame, he feels freer and more lighthearted as he's surrounded by a cheerful and lively crowd. He's surrounded by his peers. And it's a stark contrast between Norma and the young middle class company that proves that though Norma is living in what society expects to be an ideal situation at the top of the financial ladder, she is lonely and unhappy because her money cannot buy her a genuine relationship. On the other hand, we have people here at a gathering that are content in each other's company, though they're struggling to make a living. They talk about things that mean something. Even the character Betty Schaefer, as a writer, she even says, I think, film should say a little something. Well, Betty Schaefer certainly has something to say in this film, I think. And so in talking about the framing here, that gives a little bit of analysis. All right. I'm going to stop here. Sorry. The student weaves both cinematic evidence and insightful analysis into her sentence. And that's what I want you to make sure that you're doing as you are picking your evidence and you're picking your scenes. I want you to remember you only have 4 paragraphs. You cannot talk about your entire film in a 4-paragraph essay. It's just not possible to do it. or adequately. So hone in on a specific scene, a specific element. That will help a lot. But that is what I mean by cinematic evidence. Don't just identify a technique. I want you to connect how that shapes your understanding of what it is you're claiming. All right, I'm keeping it at 15 minutes, everybody. I'm signing off.